Hey guys, we got another Garage Recording Academy mastering tutorial for today. Today we're going to talk about limiting, but before that, make sure you go to garagerecordingacademy.com and download our free Studio Client Interactions Guide. It's a free guide that's going to tell you how to have a good relationship with your clients, make sure everyone gets along, make sure you can pull together to make some really great music. All right. Today we're going to be talking about limiting, and limiting is kind of debated sometimes. Some people don't think they need it, and the reason that I believe people don't think they need it is it's generally people working in heavier music genres, and the reason for that is the mixes are usually so compressed already that they don't think they need the limiter, because usually the limiter is the final compression and raising the volume of the mix. Now, another reason your limiter may not be working correctly for you is if your mix is already too loud. Now I'm going to show you, there's free metering plugins you can use, but I use this one. This was cheap. It was like 15 bucks. The Klanghelm VUMT. And the reason I like this is it has an RMS meter in it. And you'll see right now that the track comes in around minus 18 dB RMS. And that's where you should be right now because we have yet to limit. That's where your mixes should be coming out at. When you bounce your mixes out before mastering, they should be at about minus 18 dB RMS. And when we get into mastering, the very last step is to crank that limiter up. When you do that, you're going to want to be at about minus 10 dB RMS. So that's what's happening there. That's what you should be aiming for when you turn your limiter up. Now, I mentioned in the first video that some of these plugins are plugins that I've bought, and this one is the Slate VGX Virtual Mastering Console. And the reason I like this is because of this little thing right here, the constant gain monitoring button. And the great thing about that is it allows you to see what this limiter and what everything else and after this in the chain is doing to the sound without the gain. Because if you have the gain cranked up, that'll generally warp your opinion of what's going on. You'll think that because it's louder, it sounds better. That's just how it works. And that's great when we're bouncing out commercial tracks. You know, the audience thinks, oh, it's louder, so it sounds better. That's fine. But as audio professionals, we want to be doing everything we can to make sure that the track is sounding great. So I'm just going to highlight the final chorus right here and show you real quick what happens when we turn this constant gain monitoring button on and off. You might want to turn down your speakers so you don't blow your head off because it's pretty loud when we turn it off. This is what happens. And that can definitely change what you think you're actually hearing. So now we're going to go into the other controls here, the low punch, the detail, the dynamic perception, and this. So this gain knob doesn't exist right now because this is on. This is actually the last thing we're going to do. It'll be the last thing we do at the end of the next video and when we cover the last two plugins, and then we'll go back to this gain knob. So right now we're going to mess with the low punch. First of all, we're going to show you what it sounds like with this on and off, and then we're going to go into the specific controls. So obviously it sounds better with it on. Now let's go over these controls. The low punch, self-explanatory, is the low punch. Normally this starts off straight up and this starts off straight up. We've turned it down a little because you'll see when we turn it up, it's too much kick. Listen. See, turning that on, it just undoes everything we did with the kick earlier, so we turned it down to leave it there. The detail is kind of the clarity. You'll see as we turn it up, you get more clarity and more separation between the things, and as we turn it down, you get less separations between the instruments. And the reason we have it where it is we do want it clear, but we don't want it too clear that it doesn't sound like one song. Where it is right now, it melds together just enough that it sounds like one coherent track, almost like it was all recorded in one room at the same time, which is what you want. You want the feel of musicians playing together. So if we do less, it melds together too much and it gets muddy and you can't hear it out. And if it's too high, then it's too clear and everything, it doesn't sound natural. Here, listen. Again, that's one of those subtle things, but I like it where it is. I think it's the perfect balance of melded and clear to sound like a good song. We're going to skip this for a second. We'll get back to that. This right here is basically your attack and release buttons. Where it is set to now, it's hard. That's a quick attack and a quick release. And down here is a slower attack and a slower release. I'll show you on here. Normally, for limiting, this would be set to a 20-to-1 ratio if we were just using a stock compressor. And where the compressor is set now with the fast attack and fast release, so this would be at about 10 milliseconds. This would be 20 to 30 milliseconds. Or if that lever was all the way down and it was smooth, it would be a slower attack and release, which is closer to what it is now. Normally you would have regular compression, like a low ratio compression and a slow attack release, which is what we're doing now, which is what we did first. And then it would go into limiting, which would be a higher ratio, and then you would adjust this accordingly. But because we're using this other one, it does it for us. So I'll show you what happens when we switch this to smooth, which is a slower attack release, as opposed to hard, which is a faster attack and release. See, it gets way quieter. You lose so much of the punch when you switch it to smooth. And again, it's going to vary from track to track. That's just what's happening with this track. Now we're going to go into the dynamic perception. And for that part, we're going to go here to the end of the second chorus into the bridge / build up thing. So this is what it sounds like with the dynamic perception on. See, so where it's set now, you can hear the build. You feel it drop off and you feel it get louder. But if we set this down to 0, then you lose that. It sounds basically the same level all the way through, and you don't get the same effect. You don't get the same feeling of urgency when it drops off. Listen. So you get my point. It drops off way too much, which is why we're leaving that where it is. Here, listen one more time just to that drop off so you can see why we do this. You need that drop off. That's what makes the song special. All right, so we're going to leave the constant gain monitoring on for now. And so again, this knob doesn't exist. We're going to do the last video at the cover the last 2 plugins because they're basically 2 versions of the same thing working together. And then we'll cover this and crank it up to what's considered a commercial volume. Thank you guys for sticking around. Again, go to GarageRecordingAcademy.com, download that free Studio Client Interactions Guide. Please stick around after the video for a live Q&A. Ask me anything you need to about limiting, and especially limiting and mastering. And I hope to see you guys at the next video. Alright, so if anybody has any questions about limiting for mastering, you can go ahead and drop those into the chat. Be happy to answer those for you. If not, then I guess we'll just see you in the next video tomorrow. Tomorrow's the final touches There's 2 more plugins, and then like I mentioned, we're going to crank that mastering, the gain knob and the limiter up, so everything's a decent volume. And yeah, and if you're watching the replay of this, if you didn't catch it live, feel free to drop any questions you might have in the comments. Be happy to answer those for you. And something that I haven't said in a few videos now, probably should be saying every time, if you're not listening on your studio monitors, or at the very least a very good set of studio headphones, you're not going to be getting the results out of these videos that you should be. The reason for that being that there's a lot of really small, subtle tweaks in mastering that you may not be able to hear on your phone speaker or your earbuds, anything that has a smaller frequency range. You need, especially for the low stuff, like any of the bass adjustments, you really do need good monitors or a good set of studio headphones to hear those little nuances. So anyway, yeah, if you haven't been listening on those, go back, rewatch the videos on good speakers. Like I said, any questions you might have, drop them in the comments, and I will see you guys in the next video. Thank you for sticking around.